She is a pillar of the Imperial Valley LGBTQ plus community, founder of the first resource center, and is praised for her leadership and courage. However, today she finds herself in the middle of hot water, facing community backlash and a shifting narrative that has cast a shadow over her work. But whether you agree or disagree with her, today's conversation is more about just one person. It is about facing those deep philosophical questions about freedom. Are we truly free to live and stand by our convictions? Or are we only free to speak when that speech conforms to the status quo of the culture? Rosa, thank you so much for being here with us.
Good to be here.
This is the second part. Let's get into it.
Okay.
Rosa, tell us a little bit about your view on the proper procedures that youth should take when they're considering transitioning genders.
Well, like I said, I think that rather than immediately affirming them in their idea that they were born in the wrong body, for example, we really need to work on helping them deal with what it is that brought them to that. A lot of times youth take on the identity, the role, the behavior of the people that they associate with. One of the things that we've seen is rapid onset gender dysphoria, which basically means that a child or a youth can now start identifying as transgender or non-binary because they're hanging out with friends who have now taken on that identity. It could also be something that they're watching on social media. So they're very vulnerable at that age, and we're talking about adolescence to the teen years, to take on certain identities. I myself, growing up in the east side of Brawley, hung out with a group of young women who were identifying as chola, some of them trying out drugs. I wasn't too keen about trying drugs, but I did. Why? Because my peers were doing it, and I wanted to be a part of that group. So
kind of like peer pressure type of deal.
Yes, peer pressure. Sometimes it's again just wanting to fit in.
Okay. Right now you were reading some information from the article that you brought. You mentioned identity politics. Do you want to expand a little bit on that and on who it is? You're talking about nurses, doctors that are against identity politics because they're in the trenches and they're seeing all the problems that the youth that they are helping are coming in with. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, there are several organizations that have popped up that to speak against identity politics or speak against this this queer ideology, and these are people that are part of the LGBT community, as well as medical professionals, therapists, etc. Do No Harm is an organization that I follow, and anybody can follow them. Go to their website, Do No Harm, and it represents physicians, nurses, medical students, patients, and policymakers focused on keeping identity politics out of the medical education, research, and clinical practice. In other words, not just one view, but we really have to look at the issue and also the best treatment for some of the youth, children that are taking on this identity as having been born in the wrong body, for example, the trans identity.
There's an excellent segue into the current event that took place in Minneapolis. The shooter, Robert Westman, who changed his name to Robin, is that correct? Robin Westman. According to the New York Post, he said that he was tired of being trans and that he regretted being brainwashed by the trans community, or at least the extremist agenda that oftentimes envelops many of the youth. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Talking about Do No Harm, according to Do No Harm, if we leave children and youth alone when they are
questioning, having doubts,
their gender, that up to 90% of them will grow out of it. And a study was made in 2021 that they surveyed detransitioners, means people that either socially, medically, or surgically transitioned.
Do you know how many people were surveyed?
We're close to 300, most of them being females. And they asked them why it is that they detransition or stopped transitioning. Again, it could either be socially, which means that they don't take any medication, blockers, etc. They just dress or present as the opposite sex, or
kind of like
as
a
non-binary.
cross-dresser type of deal.
Sorta, And then those who did go as far as blockers and hormones, and some who had actually had surgeries. And this is a discovery that came out. 10% of them said that they decided to detransition because of discrimination. 12% said because financially they couldn't proceed. 13%, there was a lack of support. 30% were basically just unhappy with the physical changes. Another 30% that it didn't really help with their gender dysphoria. It wasn't helping. The 34% dysphoria resolved itself over time. In other words, they just stopped. And I've actually had people who came to the center who said, I just didn't want to pursue it anymore. So we really don't know why, but they basically either grow out of it or just it doesn't become a main topic for them. Another 43%, they changed because of political views. 45%, they found other alternatives to deal with this dysphoria rather than actually going through any type of change. 50% transition did not really help with their dysphoria, or it just caused more issues than help. 62% had health concerns. And I said last time that I have worked with people who have had surgeries whom had other medical issues, or because of the surgeries, other issues came up. And 70% realized that their gender dysphoria was related to other issues, which could be, again, trauma or other mental health issues. So I agree that we have to be there to help guide them, but we cannot use affirmation as the only way, and we cannot push them into transitioning without first evaluating what other issues there might be, or there is usually other issues.
So it almost seems like, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this agenda is creating even more problems. I mean, I know that it's not correct to say that because this young man transitioned, he did what he did, but by what you're telling me, it seems like to transition creates potentially more problems, not only for the people, but for society.
Transitioning does not necessarily deal with the issue at hand. And
which is gender dysphoria.
Which is gender dysphoria could be the issue at hand, but what brought that on?
Yeah, and then the problem that people are dealing, or the youth are dealing with, if anybody's dealing with gender dysphoria, that it's something else is causing that, right?
Well, what is the root cause? That's I think that is something that therapists have asked, doctors have asked, what is the root cause? And those are things that organizations such as Do No Harm, LGBT Courage, Gays Against Groomers, and some other organizations are looking into. That is that, are we really just working with the dysphoria rather than the root cause of the dysphoria?
It's a very important issue, because if you already have somebody with gender dysphoria, that means that there's already a potential problem there, emotionally, mentally. And if somebody like that goes through a transition of mutilating their body or changing it hormonally or whatever else that they can do, and that doesn't fix it, then it's just going to exacerbate whatever kind of emotional distress they're already in. Because now your natural body's not the same anymore. So now you're dealing with this emotional problem inside, and on top of that, having to deal with the fact that now you're not even, if you weren't happy with your body back then, now you're really not happy with your body. So it just makes, I think you said 30% or 34% or something like that. So that's a very bad situation that those people are placed in, or youth are placed in.
Well, it is a complex issue, and it is something that we really need to have conversations on this. Any parent who is dealing with their child, who might be questioning their gender, who might be talking about wanting to change their gender or their identity, should really look at different therapists and
different avenues,
and to get the help necessary. I, as a parent, would do my best to not allow my child to have to make any changes. No blockers, no hormones, no surgeries, nothing, until they're old enough to make those decisions for themselves.
Do you think that people who, and I don't mean to cut you off, sorry, but do you think that people who push gender affirmation for children, correct, even children are youth, affirmed at times, why are they so adamant and to push such a major life-altering decision on you? Like, why would somebody want to do that? Do you think that people really think that this helps kids or youth or adults or anybody?
I think it falls under identity politics. Once again, what is behind it? Is it money? Is it votes? Is it trying to convince us of something that is really not the answer?
So, okay. So if you're a doctor and you're pushing this, you're probably getting funded, right?
Well, we have known that pharmacists and I'm going to say that there are people making money off of this. And
like that unfortunate situation that happened in Minneapolis, Robert Westman said that he regretted being brainwashed.
Which is what a lot of people are now saying. It is brainwashing.
So and now a lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to say, oh, look at Rosa, look at this guy, they're being transphobic, right?
Yeah.
That's how they label somebody who's having this type of conversation. But we see a Robert Westman who left in his manifesto that he was, he regretted being brainwashed. So you have, on the one hand, you have people being funded, and on the other hand, you have others being brainwashed.
Well, I think that once again, if we are honest with ourselves, we can see that, because there are studies, that this queer ideology has been doing a lot of harm. And a LGBT center was in Imperial County, was started for the simple reason of giving people that space to be able to talk about their feelings, talk about what it is that they were experiencing with somebody that could understand and could identify with their experience, and then guide them through just through life, through those moments. I actually had a young lesbian who called me, who heard the first segment that we did, and she said the same thing. She says, it's true, Rosa. We do need a place where we can go and talk about these feelings. The feeling of having crushes or falling in love with somebody of the same sex. Being able to talk about that openly and being guided through that, right? Because whether you're gay, lesbian, you can get into relationships that are not good for you, because you might think, well, there's not that many lesbians, so I might as well start a relationship with this individual, but that person could not be a good person for you. Hence the reason that in a lot of same-sex relationships you find abuse. There's a lot of abuse between the partners, and it's hard to get out once you're in, for many reasons. And so those are the people that we want to reach and talk to, saying it's not okay just because they are your partner and they are of the same sex and they identify as you as lesbian, for example. It's not okay for them to treat you this way. In a lot of gay relationships between males, there's also a lot of abuse. The relationships could be very difficult, more so if one of them is not out yet, or one of them is abusing drugs, for example, or one of them is HIV positive. There's just so many other issues that need to be discussed with people that understand, that people who could guide you. That is the same with people who are identifying as transgender, for example, or have, believed to have gender dysphoria, that they have a safe place to talk about it with a professional, but without being pushed into making decisions that could later on, they could regret later on.
Regarding what you just said, I have so many things to ask you, but we're here to talk about what you just said, and also to bring people up to speed about what's taking place or has taken place within the last few months at the center that you founded. And it is all tied to your views on gender affirmation. It's simple. Because you believe in giving youth guidance and not directly affirming them, this has caused so much backlash and many in the community to look at you and view you as transphobic. Simply because, in my opinion, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I see it is because you believe that people should have guidance instead of automatically affirming them. That's the origins of the issues. I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that
it might be one major issue.
Yeah, when we decided to
the name change of this.
Do the name change from the Imperial Valley LGBT Resource Center to the Donnelly Center, that is when I began to read articles about me that were very negative. Yeah. Where we discussed last time that a lot of the reporting that was about the center, the work that we were doing, etc., was very positive. Then it turned. It turned simply because we decided that to change the name wasn't to remove services, but it was more so to let the community or Imperial County know that our center from the very beginning was to serve everyone, but very specifically to develop services and resources for the LGBT population.
But you mentioned everyone at the beginning.
It is in our articles of incorporation. It mentions not only lesbian, gay, transgender.
That's an important detail too.
Yes, it also mentions their families, friends, churches.
So you were bringing the center up to its original vision.
Exactly, which was to serve everyone, but specifically because we were lacking the services and resources in Imperial County, was to be able to find those professionals, agencies who could help us to help this population. So it has been from the beginning, and like I was saying, in the Articles of Incorporation, it has LGBT, it has friends, it has family, and it has churches. So we never excluded anyone, but we did have a mission, and the mission was to serve this population. What we found with LGBT on our door was that we had grants to help people with mortgages and rental assistance, specifically during COVID. And some people didn't come through that door because it had LGBT.
They felt that it was only
yes,
for LGBT.
If I'm not gay, they're not going to help me, and that was not the case.
That's interesting.
And I had mentioned that we are not the only ones that made a name change to open it up to let people know that we were serving everyone. Other organizations had done that. It was a discussion that I had with the board, and it had been going for over a year. And then when we decided to do that, the title in the Calexico Chronicle, LGB without the T, was extremely misleading.
Interesting. Okay. I'm fascinated by the reality that the center was initially meant for everyone, including the LGBT or LGB, and they make it a big deal. You mentioned the T, right? But that's very important because, like you said in that Calexico Chronicle or Imperial Valley Weekly article, that what was it? The LGB Center.
Yeah, it was in the Calexico Chronicle. LGB
right.
without the T.
Right. They're and they kind of they're ignorant to the history, the real history. This is why people need to do their homework, ask questions, not ostracize, right? Because hey, guess what? The center was initially for everybody.
Right. With the concentration on providing services and resources for this population.
So the name change
didn't remove that.
You were just services. It was actually following the same the original vision.
Right.
The original vision, yeah.
But and this is the focus as well, that the way I presented it to the board was that we didn't want to be locked into a movement or an ideology that the majority of the board members were not feeling comfortable with. This is when I began to openly discuss the transitioning of children with the board, asking them, how do you feel, and getting their feedback. So we also didn't want to be seen as, because you have LGBT, now you have to, push this idea or be on board with the queer ideology.
But if you think about it, I mean, and from a common sense standpoint, affirming somebody who's confused, especially if they're youth, right away before guidance is not helping them. That's actually contrary to the vision of any nonprofit
that would be contrary to
that claims to help youth that are confused.
Exactly. So we had during COVID, we know that many youth were staying home, they weren't going to school, they weren't socializing, etc. So many of them did get into social media, and they were now presenting or talking about possibly being transgender, and those youth were coming to the center. We had a grant to help them meet up with a therapist online to help them with that. And after a few sessions, I did ask them, how is it going? Because you need to evaluate the service that you're providing to make sure that it's something that would help them. And some of them were telling me that within the first session, within the first few minutes, the therapist was saying, if you need a letter from me for your doctor, or somebody to help you transition, I can write you this letter. And this is the first time that I really said,
that's alarming.
Yes, exactly. I was alarmed.
That's
I was
alarming.
like, what is happening
It's
here?
like
This is not
that's
the
not
reason.
even that's not even therapy.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
That's when I said, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not giving them the access to the therapist for that. I want them to discuss, how are they doing in school? How did this come about that you were okay, a few months ago, and now you're identifying as transgender? Where is that coming from? So I wanted them to explore that with the therapist. But when they were telling me, oh no, the therapist said he'll send me a letter or she'll send me a letter, and that's what made me question, what is it that we're doing here? Is that really what we want? Because a parent trusts us to give them the best resource or professional so that they can find help for their child, right? And if all they're coming back with is just affirmation, yes, I would question it as a parent, and the parents were questioning as well. And I said, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. We need to look into this.
What do you think the role of Christians in this topic should be? People who worship God and embrace, because I know from experience that, and I was one of these people myself, soon as I heard any type of conversation with the LGBTQ queer, I automatically had a judgmental attitude towards this conversation. But I think that they should be invested in this topic because they have the opportunity to help children, youth, not hurt them, like not make this decision to alter their life, forever. So what do you have to say about that?
This is interesting because we automatically think of Christians. Christians are anti-trans, anti-homosexuals, etc. But if you look at some of the YouTube videos of parents that are speaking up at school board meetings who are talking about the schools not teaching children about gender or this queer ideology, you're going to find that a lot of those parents are Muslim as well.
Oh, really?
It is not just Christianity. There are other faiths who strongly hold to the male-female concept. They strongly hold to the heterosexual concept. So it's not just Christians. And there, as parents, I think that whether you're Christian or not, or Muslim or not, you still hold to that because it's what you learned, right? So what I've seen is that many parents they get scared when they hear about their child maybe even thinking about changing their gender or their child coming out as gay.
And then sending them to public school. And in public school you have these liberal teachers, liberal administration. Not in every school, but
in many schools.
In many schools.
It's part of the public school system now.
How alarming is, how dangerous is that? You say you send your child to public school and then they come back with all these different ideas.
Yeah, because it's something that's been infiltrated into our schools, and hence the reason that many parents are speaking against it. Thankfully, some school boards have listened to the parents and have removed some of the textbooks and some of the topics that parents were opposing. Other school boards, they're pushing it. They're standing their ground. And but again, it has to do with the radical movement. I say that parents need to know what's happening in schools, who the teacher is, because we see now videos where students are recording their teachers who are saying some political stuff, things that are, religious, things that are also about the queer ideology, and it could be pretty scary for the parents when their kids come home and they're sharing this. Maybe not necessarily to their parents, but they're seeing the notebooks, they're seeing what their kids are learning, or later on they hear about it. So I think that it's very important for parents to be involved in whatever it is that their kids are learning in school.
So next question. What would you say to those who feel betrayed or abandoned by the direction under your leadership last December that the center took with the name change?
Under my leadership, well, again, one of the things that I told Corey Suzuki from KPBS when he interviewed me recently, I told him, because there was a question is, why did you remove the transgender support? We were in transition, even before the name change. We were in transition.
But even that question is not correct, right? Because you never removed the transition.
Never.
Right?
No. Well, this is what I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. The center was in transition in that we were looking to provide the best service, and what happens a lot of times in support groups is that if you don't have a facilitator that knows how to facilitate, that knows how to guide the conversation, you're basically just whining or gossiping or just, sharing things that it's not encouraging, it's not benefiting, mm-hmm. right? And we had an HIV support group, and the person facilitating that support group is a person living with HIV and a person that understands the treatments that are out there, what new treatment is coming in, what the medication does, etc. That was a good group because the facilitator came with knowledge, experience, and they also they understood the group that were coming for support. We had transgender support group. That one varied because sometimes we had really good facilitators who really cared about the people that were coming to the group, and then we had others that were not as dedicated. We had a mental health support group. Same thing. It was people with lived experience and that had gone through a facilitator training that would facilitate the group, and that was beneficial. If a group didn't have a good facilitator, it would dissolve or it just wouldn't be productive. And it's not easy to dissolve groups, it's not easy to dissolve a service, but sometimes it's better to do it so that it later doesn't become a problem or a burden. So we had already been through transition. If you say that people have felt abandoned, we didn't abandon anyone. Maybe we didn't have the ideal support group for you at the moment, but there are groups that go for a long time. There are groups that are for a short time. We didn't abandon anybody because even if there wasn't a support group specifically for that, there was still that one-on-one.
It was the same experience the first time, a couple of days ago, and also a few months ago. Whenever you speak to somebody who's actually in the trenches and everything, the primary source, right, of what's taking place, you get to see and learn things that other people who are, for whatever reason, caught up on their emotions or bias are not able to see. So it's been very refreshing here talking to you. One last question regarding this recent controversy that has taken the center. What has been the most hurtful thing that you've experienced?
I would say what has been the most hurtful has been that the people that stood by you, worked with you, that were there, part of the center, either via a board member or an employee or a volunteer, and didn't say anything at the time when you were there, saying anything like, even at a board meeting or at one of the, we used to get together every Friday at 1 p.m. We call it the volunteer support group, and I always said this is a support group for us, board members, volunteers. We had interns, we had employees. Every Friday at 1 p.m. This is a time for us to get to meet, learn from one another, meet one another, and also ask questions. Bring anything up, anything that you think we could change. This is a time for us, because it wasn't usually people from the outside. It was us that knew the how things worked at the center, and now I'm hearing things that I didn't hear then. If you're a board member, you have a voice, you have a vote. If you can't bring it up then, when you have a voice and a vote, why now, 2 years later, or a year later? So it makes me think that it's only to attack, but not for anything positive to come out of this. The same thing, you're gonna have employees that were let go for a reason, and if you let them go and then later on they see you and they hug you and they say thank you for the opportunity, that's wonderful. But now, because I am not in your court, because I have shared my views, now I'm everything about me is negative. Everything I did, everything I say is negative. So I have to learn to see, did this person bring that to my attention 2, 3, 4 years ago? Or are they just sharing what they're sharing only to, once again, like we were talking, only to be part of that circle that they're, that they're hanging out with? And we see this nowadays.
They're part of the cool crowd right now.
So we see that now, is that you're either going to believe like I believe, speak like I speak, say what I say, or you're going to stand alone. And I prefer 100% to stand alone based on my convictions than to be part of a group that later on, even between them, they might be bickering and fighting.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Okay, so this wraps up the second interview with Rosa Diaz, founder of the LGBT Resource Center and pioneer for the LGBTQ community here in Imperial Valley. We're going to do a part 3 to get into the nitty-gritty of what has taken place a few months ago at the center. So if you're interested, you have to tune in and watch.